call this work session of the Mayor and Council to order. Today is March 25th, 2013. First, we'll go over our regular scheduled meeting. The invocation, the announcements, pledge the flag. Ceremonial matters, we should have someone here from Project Pause to present the canine desk. And then we have the Clantons who have received the Good Samaritan Award from Lake Lanier that will be recognized. Minutes, you all received a copy of the minutes from the March 11th meeting. Does anybody have any corrections or changes or objections?
They were wonderful.
Okay. City manager's report.
I'll just have a couple of items real quick. So
We have no consent agenda. Under old business, our public hearing, we have the application for the budget car rental facility. Mr. Davis.
Yes, ma'am. It's the old Valero station, 2960 West Main. It's been vacant for quite some time. Budget Car Rental wishes to come in and establish one of their operations there. It's gone to Planning Commission. They blessed it, and they've given it an okay with conditions. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to try and run through it.
Any major condition? I didn't see anything significant.
There's nothing really major about it. The conditions really evolve around what current code would be and what would be logical to ask somebody to do with that small a site. Right. And we're giving them some breaks. They're doing some things. It's better to have an active use
Oh, yeah.
than a vacant building there.
Tom, is that thing clearance for takeoff or something?
Check with the FAA.
Anybody have any other questions for Mr. Davis?
Just if you wouldn't mind comment a little bit about the gas tanks in the ground, and how is that being handled?
The gas tanks are in the ground. They will remain in the ground. If for some reason they were to try and remove them or want to remove them, they'd have to go through Georgia EPD for all the permitting on that. But EPD permitted the closure of the station and the closure of the tanks. So they have permits to continue to operate around there. They'd have to go back to them if they wanted to add, if they wanted to use the tank, they'd have to go back to EPD.
But there's nothing in the tank as far as you know.
As far as I know, no.
they would have had to fill them with sand or concrete. You know, EPD would have made sure that they closed it.
They close them, clean it out, fill it up with some inert substance.
I would recommend that we change the ordinance form that's attached, just slightly editing. I'm not sure how the review went on that particular one, but we restate some conditions, and it's just a slight bit of editing. I mean, to approve it as is, because it does contain the correct standards for that zoning class, which is 2 acres, and then we vary it. So we restate in your resolution. You restate the standards, and then you vary from them. That to me creates a little confusion. We're probably going to want to edit it just a little bit. I mean, to get it signed tonight on the signature page and just edit out the standards that you're varying from is probably going to keep people from getting confused later on over the ordinance.
And just to add something extra, kind of budget related, when the state went through their tax reform, the legislature last year came up with a lot of tax reform changes, one of which you're going to will address tonight, the title tax. They also included the possibility of a local government passing a 3% excise tax on rental vehicles. Whether it's U-Haul, which we have here, this would be a new business that would come under that excise tax, and I have recommended in the budget that we do adopt that ordinance. So it's something we will talk about during the budget, but we've got to look at revenue, and that's one of those things that are coming up, and this is another potential source here. So.
Then we have the action on the economic development ordinance. If I can have a motion then to waive that, and what is our next meeting date? April 8th.
Can I have a question about that?
Does anybody have any questions on the ordinance?
Reading through this ordinance pretty fast, just wanted to get a quick understanding. Maybe Eric, you can help me out on that one. 4 C. 4C. That's, 4 is titled, it begins with the mayor and council may undertake any other lawful good, and C, look at C, item number 4. And that item 4 says, have an estimated fiscal impact with a net present value to the city of at least $100,000 as determined by Gwinnett County analysis. What is the NPV in regard of time?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
What is NPV?
It's net present value of a future stream.
Right, so how's that amount determined?
The 100,000 is determined by that Gwinnett County analysis. The Gwinnett County Economic Development Office has an economic impact model that they use for all of their projects as well, and the Gwinnett County Partnership uses that model. We would ask them to use that same model to develop an economic impact statement for a company that's interested in coming to here. That model gives a net present value of their contribution. That's the model that we would use.
Is that not measured, so when you work with an NPV or net present value about anything, you simply want to decide about when you're going to gain or exceed that, in this case, 100,000. Is it months, is it years, is it an immediate investment of 100,000? Then to be able to calculate properly what the NPV is along a set number of years. How are those set number of years determined? I mean, are you saying that the company or the corporation or the business should come up with $100,000?
I think this is something that we would do for the city. And it's important to provide as much information to the decision makers, the mayor and council, before you make a decision on inducements. And this is one of those formulas, which fortunately people who came before us at Partnership Gwinnett, I forget the economist's name that came up with the formulation here.
Probably Alfie.
But
It was probably Alfie.
Alfie Meeks, I would
So
imagine.
it
He's
probably
gone now,
was.
he's at
But
Georgia
all
Tech.
that's outlined in the information that was sent out to us. It's all right here.
But it's, Mike, it's a, you know, in immediate, that would have to be the immediate net present value that they're bringing to the city based on that formula.
In order for them to qualify for the incentives, they have to get, it's called skin in the game, I guess is how I would view it.
It's just another box that gets checked when you're looking at inducements and what the value of that investment is coming to the community. So that's.
I'll make an appointment, come up and see you, then we can go through some of the guys.
We'll be glad to.
Other questions?
I don't believe the sponsor bill wants to delay it. I mean, I think we still need to go up first reading tonight.
Well, I was gonna have my say when we went to the agenda part.
Okay.
I mean, on the work session part.
As we go through the process, I had a couple suggestions that can be done after first reading. It's not a problem. There's sort of an ambiguity in number 2 where it says we're going to be signing confidentiality agreements that are consistent with the Georgia Open Records Act, and there's not much. That's sort of those are mutually exclusive. And I just didn't want anybody to get confused over that.
So we have to turn off the lights when we sign it.
Yeah,
Is that what we have to do? That qualifies, right?
To get it, for that to have any meaning at all, it would be nice to change, because I didn't want to confuse, because there are going to be things that they want to keep confidential, but they can't bring them here, leave them here. So we might want to work on that. And then on the contracting side, which is paragraph 3B, I would really recommend, I think we're creating procurement incentives, and y'all have one where there's a percentage for your local vendors that I think is an enforceable provision. But all of those procurement practices should be qualified by consistent with Georgia the current Georgia contract code, because it really limits what you can do. And so I thought to add that in as a qualifier, so we remembered that those requirements were there.
Okay. We put it on A to the extent allowed by law, so we can add that.
New business, we have consideration action on the bid for TW Briscoe Park pool contract. Mr. Sanders.
We have gone through a process, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk about in my report, that has brought us to a recommendation to enter into a contract with Positively Pools. And I think that it has been worked through very thoroughly, and with a process that I think would stand up to anybody's scrutiny. I think Lisa and the rec department are ready to go. As you know, last year this was a nightmare, and that's one of the things that I wanted to make sure we didn't go through again. So here we are at the end of March, ready to recommend a contract for this next pool season that starts Memorial Day.
But that's not the same company we used last year.
No.
Yes,
No. No.
that's what I thought.
Any questions about the pool contract? And we have resolution in support of the opportunity zone application.
This is the final chapter in putting together an application to DCA to have our 3 opportunity zone areas approved. We are doing this. Gwinnett County is also putting together a package of support. We'll send this to Ken Bleakley, and it will be ready to go to DCA, and should get approval or word back in 60 days from then. Always remembering that if it happens anytime in this calendar year, it will revert back to January 1. So it's been a long process. I appreciate everybody's support for that. Hopefully it will be successful. I think it will.
Any questions on the resolution?
Maybe just one clarification on timing, but DCA can take up to 90 days
90 days.
to approve that, just so we have correct
Hopefully they-
expectations.
hope-
We know
hope
it
they will.
wasn't, but,
Yeah.
yeah.
We then have the intergovernmental agreement for the title tax.
This is another item that stems from the tax reform package of last year, where the sales tax and the birthday tax, ad valorem birthday tax on vehicles were changed to this one-time title tax. It has gone through, I guess, a long review and interpretation process by 159 counties in the Department of Revenue, and Gwinnett has finally issued a intergovernmental agreement, which we really do not have an opportunity to change or to argue with if we want to have the tax collected and transferred. But in theory, at the end of the year, there is what's called a true-up process, which, as I said, in theory, should make it to where we lose no dollars, that we are guaranteed at least the amount we collected last year. Nobody has been through this before. We don't know, the county doesn't know, no one knows how the collections will pan out. We hope successfully. We hope as everybody knows, I guess until about 3 or 4 years ago, revenues went up every year. 3 or 4 years ago, they started declining because of the people were buying less new cars. The value of the property out there was declining. We certainly know, in talking to Tax Commissioner Steele, we know he and his staff have done a lot of work on this. The Department of Revenue has been right there with them, and as well as other counties, and so we're hoping for the best. But it is a change, but this is simply an intergovernmental agreement between us and Gwinnett County to collect and distribute that new title tax.
Questions? Okay. That concludes the regular agenda. Then on our work session agenda, we have business incentives. I think that's become moot with the economic development ordinance. So the sign ordinance update. Mr. Davis, I had asked for an update. We passed our sign ordinance. But I think there's still a lot of people out there we saw when we did our sign tour that are possibly in violation of our new ordinance. So I wanted to know what staff's plan is of first getting the ordinance out there to our businesses so they're aware of it, and then what our enforcement plan is going to be. Maybe that you're telling me we need staff to enforce it, but I just want to hear from staff as to what our plan is going to be.
We got the ordinance out to the business community, as it was being developed. We never got a lot of input from them as we went through it. We have already gone out and begun enforcement actions on items such as LED lights framing windows. There are 7 or 8 here in the city. We've issued a letter to each one of them. We've visited with a few, and we seem to be in compliance on that. We've had a few occasions of speaking with managers about sign spinners, and they go away for a while and they come back and we speak to them again. But it's been going along pretty well. I think we're gonna have some issues before too long.
Are we in any jeopardy of, and I understand you have limited staff and there's a lot of signs in this city. Are we in any jeopardy if we don't take action against certain businesses for being in violation that we are acquiescing into what their sign actually is?
Wow. We are taking action against the ones that we find to be most objectionable. And we're trying to do it the same way we did it with our residential customers. This is the new law, don't do this. And we're giving them a chance to comply with it. With the Chinese buffet up there, their flags are down and the inflated guys down. So we're making some headway in places like that. We're trying to stay up on top of it. Right now, we have already had, this comes under QOL, and we've already had about 700 cases in QOL this year. And we're not even trying to dig up cases. That's just ones that are coming in. Guys are putting about 35 to 40% of their week at a minimum goes into these QOL operations. So we're hitting it as best we can.
Well, and I guess probably the best way to put it too, right now, we're kind of in warning mode. We need to meet with the judge to make sure he understands what we're trying to do with the ordinance. When cases do start getting made, he's on board and comfortable with it. Depending on his input, we'll need to adjust, but we're going to follow up with him to make sure that when we get to the true citation writing and enforcement situation, that we're all on the same page.
And this is my concern. First of all, I'm not looking to go out there and cite everybody that's in violation of the sign ordinance. I do think there needs to be an education period. But I think the council and staff, we all put a lot of time into making sure we had a good sign ordinance and one that we were comfortable with. And so if we don't have the staff that we need to enforce it, or if we need to change something in order to enforce it, I don't want us to now have this sign ordinance and it just be sitting there and not being used.
Right.
And it may be that we need to send some type of brochure out to the different businesses or something along those lines, and it may be a budget question we need to look at, but I just want to make sure, you all communicate to us as council of what we need to do to make this sign ordinance work.
We have because we do the business licensing as well, we've got a very good list of email addresses for the various business managers. So we'll probably drop a copy of the ordinance in an email or a link to the ordinance and tell them it's changed. We need you to take a look at this. Be aware that we are going to be checking things. Probably going to have some chats with Roy, because his guys have been doing a real good job of policing the illegal signs. If you've looked in the dumpster recently, they've been pretty effective in it. if we can figure out how to recycle those puppies, we could have another stream of revenue. But, we'll get out to them and talk them through it. We've got to figure out a way to do it with, we tried to have them in here for a community meeting and nobody showed up. Probably go with Eric Shop on Scenic Group and do a song and dance for them. And then see what we can do beyond that. The problem, when you go out to do an enforcement run on signage, it turns into a 30 to 45-minute conversation with everybody you run into, because we're the city and we're trying to shut them down. And we have to walk them through everything we're doing. And it's very time consuming.
Well, I can tell you though, that it pays off in the long run. I mean, the fact that we are a small city, when I talk to people about annexation, that the friendliness of the development process goes a long way. That's important. We want to be successful annexation-wise. We don't want to lose that. It's enforcement, but it is kind of conversational. I mean, we need to do it in the right way. And there may come a time where the standards are not being met, and we need to be a little tougher. We don't want to lose that, and it will be a discussion, the other part of the budget discussion. But I think that, and Kelly, I see you sitting over there. I'd love to get John on a Commerce Club agenda. So, I mean, you've got a chance to hit a lot of businesses right there, just to talk about the ordinance. So, okay.
I believe, isn't the Commerce Club, aren't you also having where you meet, what are your evening?
Our meet and greet is coming up in April, so that might be an opportunity
Maybe we
too.
could, the city have a table at that where you could be there, people could ask you questions.
With copies.
Yeah.
I'm sure the person from Domino's will know us.
You can introduce us.
He won't have to stop by then.
That's true.
Frees up another spot.
I watched him plant a sign out here, and I went and grabbed it while he was still out in the area.
Your pizza's gonna be great.
I'm not sure I'd eat that pizza.
I don't want to eat that pizza.
Anybody else have questions about the sign on that? All right, economic development ordinance, Councilman Kraus.
We've kind of touched on this already when we went through the agenda, but this ordinance that's before us has been developed over the last 2 years. This is not an ordinance that just was thrown together in the last 6 months. It's been worked on for the last 2 years. Eric and I met this morning and we've reviewed the draft again, and we accommodated Councilman Manuel with his edits, and I talked to City Attorney Powell on his recommendations, and Butch and I discussed it as well, things that I was not fully knowledgeable about or understood. I had about 17 or 18 questions, and Eric was very patient with me, and we went through the whole thing step by step. So a copy of this was already given to us at the February 25th session, so I hope everybody did have a chance to look at it. The most current drive is a request from Partnership Gwinnett to approve a local ordinance of this nature. So without this ordinance, the city's not able to offer any specific incentives, inducements to selected businesses, or encourage retention, expansion, or recruitment. We're kind of sitting there flopping our arms. We can't do anything without this ordinance. It's really very important that we get this passed. This ordinance provides guidelines for the engagement of Partnership Gwinnett and the Gwinnett Chamber during the recruitment process. And we all know what the Gwinnett Chamber can do after being downtown with Walton EMC, Georgia EMC, and what they can do for us in the recruitment area. There's no physical impact, so we don't have to count pennies. Any future financial impact will be, let's see, approved by mayor and council and the city manager. That's not something that we're not gonna get to look at. This is constantly gonna be in front of us. And so I would like to waive the first reading of this and place it on our agenda to vote on April 8th, at the appropriate time. And I also understand that we can still look at this in this time frame, in the next 2 weeks, still kind of tweak it. I want to change the solid substance of this ordinance, but if you don't like some of the verbiage, we can wiggle it around a little bit to make it sound a little bit smoother. And I looked at it from a business point, bringing my business into the city and what I would have to do after reading all this. And could I understand it? And I was okay with it. There's some things that maybe I would have to go to Eric and say, well, what exactly does that mean? But there was nothing major. I'm very comfortable with this. I know that the mayor can't move forward on her incentives until this ordinance is passed, and I hope that all of you will let this go for the first reading, and that we buckle down and get it passed in the second, and get some incentives and get the city rolling in the economic department. Any questions?
Economic development update.
Appreciate it. Thank you, ma'am. Mayor, council, I left a brief paper. I went over the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce on Tuesday to a meeting and heard a young man speak named David Kaminsky. He created a little business called Pardot, which he just recently sold for $800 million. And he talked about this concept of friction, and Butch and I were trying to figure out what to share with you. I thought, well, this would be a good opportunity to just bring that forward to you and talk a little bit about it and share that kind of point with you. I found a little blog entry that an economic development person made a little while back. You can see it in the middle there. It talks a little bit about friction, but it's exactly what it is from a business perspective. It's something that would cause a business to slow down or not be able to move forward as it would like to move forward. And from the city's perspective then, the economic development ordinance we're looking at, incentives that Mayor would talk about, are all things that could help remove that friction. Those are all things that should be focused on how do we create, or as he uses the word here, use lubricants to help those businesses come in as smooth a path as possible. A couple of things we've already done. When Emily was here as our intern the first year around, and with John's help, they spent quite a bit of time looking through all of our development review process and trying to streamline it and make it a little more accessible. We reorganized it on the web and did some things. So we've done that. You're considering this economic development ordinance, which is another step in that process, and we're moving that forward. Some other things just to look at there, as we look at the downtown town center area, and as you start to think about what goes in the next budget cycle, looking at, is there a way to do a regional stormwater? Stormwater is a cost to local businesses, and so if there's a way we could handle that on a regional basis so they don't have to impact, for example, every site doing its own stormwater plan, that removes friction for them. It makes it easier for them, because all they would have to do is come to us and put the pipe to where our retention would be, and it's set up to handle what they would put in there. So that's an example of one. There's others there. Cooperate with.
Let me just say, that's not something that we just came up with. We've been in a couple of meetings lately where we've asked developers and people who lease from developers, would that help? And we got a very positive response about that.
And so the list here is not complete, but I wanted to give you kind of a feel for what some of the things would be. Cooperating with the Eastside Medical Center on their transportation and development needs. That's referring to the area around Tree Lane and Ronald Reagan and all that up there. There's other things as well that could be done, but I just wanted to share some of that with you and have you start to think about, from a friction perspective, how do we remove friction for businesses? Because in the end, that's what we're all about, is making this a place where business is friendly, entrepreneurship is friendly, and we're growing the businesses with the least amount of resistance that we can provide. And there obviously will have to be something, because that's what needs to be in place, but the minimum amount is what our goal is. Thank you, Mayor.
Questions for Eric? Thank you, Eric. LCI update.
Everything is moving fine. We did receive an email today from our project manager. There is one issue that we are trying to clarify for her, and that's the lighting issue. We have received approval, I think I said last time, to use a sole source vendor on lighting fixtures. The same fixture that's out here, we'll be able to carry through the whole project. Where Ms. Stovall Dixon is a little confused, and she's approved the funding for it, 80% funding, but where she's a little confused is how it gets put into the plans. Lighting is always looked at as almost a separate part of any construction project like this. Most of the time, utility companies are responsible because it's their power. They're responsible for the installation. Walton EMC, they can provide you any level of fixtures. They can't provide this fixture out here, but they can provide certain fixtures if you want to buy or lease from them. But they're the ones who put them in. And Crystal has not had a lot of experience on construction projects. So she's got an email today where she's a little confused. I talked with her. Our lead engineer with AMEC, Georgia Brannick, has talked with her. We're probably gonna have a meeting next week in her office to make sure that she's on board with what we're trying to do here. It's not a step back, it's just a temporary issue that we need to get past. So,
Can we talk with Walt DMC and just ask them to do a pass-through on those lighting fixtures?
we can. We're gonna have everybody at that table. You know, Scott Walker has been just terrific. I mean, they have a big number for utilities, but we were able to roll that in to get 80% of the total utility cost in the budget. But we just have to make sure Crystal understands, and so we can get a final approval on the budget. So, just full disclosure, we're dealing with that single issue.
On the LCI, there are really two litigation matters still outstanding. One is a third that's waiting to close, but we have a mediation session set up the day after your next meeting. And so if we could get on an executive session agenda for you guys for those cases to get some resolution authority and report back on all pending litigation matters, including we've got several nuisance actions where we've got to a point where we need to update you on some funding requirements that go with demolition of facilities and get some authority there too.
Do we need to do that tonight or next meeting?
I don't think we're under any deadline.
Next meeting.
Next meeting would be a deadline.
We can do it right now, or we can do it next meeting.
I mean, I can probably brief you pretty well. We'd still need it for the next meeting for the mediation
Wait then.
preparation.
Okay.
All right, we will be adjourned until 7:30.